Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, colleagues, today I am presenting Senate Bill 866, which will allow teenagers, those aged 12 to 17, to get vaccinated on their own and to protect their own health so that they can be healthy and take those affirmative steps to be healthy. This will apply to vaccines that have been approved by the FDA and recommended by the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. First of all, I do want to really thank the committee for its very thorough and on-point analysis that I think very accurately describes all of the critiques of the bill and the support for the bill and the arguments in favor of the bill. So I'm very appreciative of that thorough analysis. Colleagues, SB-866 builds on existing law. This is not some brand new approach to the age of consent for health care in California. It builds on longstanding existing law, which provides that in California, people aged 12 and over can make certain important health decisions for themselves. Currently, those 12 and older are able to get the HPV vaccine and the hepatitis B vaccine on their own without their parents' consent. They can go and get tested for HIV or other STIs on their own without their parents' consent or knowledge. They can receive treatment for STIs without their parents' consent or knowledge. They can get mental health treatment, intimate partner abuse-related treatment, and other medical healthcare services on their own without their parents' consent. Minors of any age can consent to birth control or abortion. We also know that in other states, teenagers are able to go and get vaccinated on their own. In Rhode Island, in Washington, D.C., in South Carolina, Oregon, Alabama, and this is described in the analysis. Yet currently in California, if you are under the age of 18 and you want to get the flu shot, or you want to get the COVID vaccine, or you want to get the measles vaccine, or you want to get the polio vaccine because you were homeschooled and never got the polio vaccine, which can result in your paralysis, and we know that polio still exists in the world. If your parents either refuse to allow you because they're against vaccines, or they're neglecting you medically, what we're telling those teenagers is tough luck. You can't protect your health. You have to wait until you're 18 years old. Then you can do it. And that's what this bill really addresses, saying to those teenagers, if you want to protect your health with a vaccine that has been deemed safe and effective by the FDA and that has been recommended for you, for your age group, by the CDC, you can go ahead and get it from a qualified medical professional who has been trained to administer vaccines, who has been trained to determine informed consent, and who knows how to provide health care and is professionally responsible to provide ethical, appropriate health care. That's what this bill is about. I know that this bill has gotten caught up in all of the vaccine wars and all the misinformation out there about vaccines. But this is fundamentally about allowing teenagers to make that choice and protect their own health. I respectfully ask for an aye vote. With me today to testify under the committee's structure as outlined by the chair are Katie, who is the Director of Innovation and Strategy at Generation Up, and Sanvi, a student advocate with Generation Up, followed by George Soers with the California Medical Association, and Dr. Dean Bloomberg, a UC Davis pediatrician and board member of the California Immunization Coalition.
Thank you so much, Senator. And why don't we have our Generation Up witnesses, and then whenever the two of you are done, we can switch in with the additional witness. And so, Katie, are you going to begin? Whenever you're ready. And again, I just want to clarify, 15 minutes in total for all four of the witnesses, and I think there'll be updates on kind of how much time's left so you can manage the time. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Judiciary Committee. I'm Katie, and I'm a 17-year-old student from San Jose, California. What I'm about to read to you is a first-person account of one of my friend's lived struggles during the COVID-19 pandemic. My mother never let me get vaccinated. In 2018, I got hospitalized with the flu and begged my mother the next year to allow me to get vaccinated. Teens like me die every year from the flu. When COVID hit, I started making slideshows every week to convince her to allow me to get vaccinated, but to no avail. Being unvaccinated led me to isolate myself in my room for over a year, filled with anxiety about spreading the virus even further and missing out on key developmental moments in my teen years. I had to give up my first job and missed out on almost 3 years of high school. I could no longer play the sport I loved. I felt paralyzed, unable to make my own decisions about my own health and safety. While her individual experience underscores how the status quo fails to protect students from public health risks, she represents only one of the thousands of students who have been shoved aside by current policies that require youth to obtain parental consent in order to get vaccinated, which is what we are here to talk about today. Every student has their own story. We cannot tell all of them to you today, nor can our words even begin to capture the aggregate experiences through which these students have endured. But what we can and hope to do is to urge you to recognize that the vaccine crisis transcends just the anti-vax minority. Recognize that the politicization of vaccine policies has enabled delays in student health support services and significantly reduced the quality of public education. Recognize that vaccination gaps not only affect students' academic performance, but also harm their mental and emotional well-being. And finally, recognize that low-income districts struggle the most to subsidize online learning resources for education shifts resulting from COVID-19 outbreaks. By allowing students to self-consent to a list of pre-approved vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccination, SB-866 empowers people like us to drive our own well-being and, by extension, our educational opportunities. Students should not have to go to court to get vaccinated, nor should their family circumstances put them at any unnecessary risk of injury and death. In other words, autonomy over our own bodies and our own medical decisions is a fundamental right that ought to be enshrined within the law. Legislators, this bill is not about your kid. Neither is it a measure targeted towards a specific political group. Rather, SB-866 is a remedy to a long-standing struggle facing students from a myriad of distinct backgrounds. Immigrant families often face language barriers, making it difficult for parents to stay on top of their children's medical needs. In these situations, students are often the decision makers for their households. Similarly, some students have parents who are too preoccupied with work and daily responsibilities to accompany them to a vaccine clinic, whereas other students face divorced parents who may disagree on the course of their medical treatment. On the other hand, some kids come home to medically neglectful families. A parent's abuse and/or disregard of their child's well-being should not be the reason an otherwise healthy student contracts a damaging disease with potentially fatal implications, placing themselves and their communities at risk. Californian youth already have the capability to self-consent to various forms of healthcare, such as abortions, treatment for mental health disorders, and the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of STDs. Accessing preventive treatments against a life-threatening infectious disease is no different from the current health services accessible to youth by the law. Now, in the midst of a pandemic, it is more imperative than ever before that students who have been consistently denied agency over their own well-being and livelihoods are the ones making their own medical decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Sanvi.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Sanvi, and I'm also a 17-year-old student from San Jose, California. In a world where our nation prides itself on making humanity more resilient than ever, our rights as students are slowly being taken away. Medical research and changes to infrastructure make seeking healthcare more accessible every day, but in vain, as recent court decisions have snatched away our reproductive rights. Scientific advancements have increased the human lifespan to a historic maximum, but school violence has threatened our right to even make it out of secondary school alive. Every day, we are faced with an insurmountable number of uncertainties, shared within the school walls but ignored by the administrators who facilitate our education. Will I make it out of school today? Will my grandparents die if I accidentally bring COVID into the house? Will my home catch on fire while I'm at school because of climate change-induced dryness and high temperatures? With many of these school safety-related uncertainties, California has already paved the way. Unlike many other states, we've made a statewide commitment to reducing the risk of gun violence in schools. We've instituted excused mental health absences to offer struggling students a brief reprieve from the overwhelming pressure of school and other related commitments. We've promised to preserve access to reproductive health care, and we've invested in programs and infrastructure to support a greener future. Public health policies should be next. The pandemic is still going on. In January, school districts across the state faced one of the worst student outbreaks since the inception of the disease. Even just last week, at Katie and I's high school graduation, almost a quarter of our grade fell sick, causing many of us to miss the very event that defines our young adult lives. Earlier this year, in a conversation with students across the state, one student said, quote, "Everybody is absent on campus, especially teachers, which makes learning hard for students and teaching hard for teachers." Student 2 said, "As an immunocompromised student, I'm afraid to attend classes for fear of catching an illness that will almost certainly kill me." Student 3 said, "I now experience social anxiety, but I'm also just generally scared that I will get sick from being around too many people." Student 4 said, "My friend has stress-induced tics due to the stress from being at school after being out with COVID for 2 whole weeks." Student 5 said, "I would feel safer if I knew that everyone I was going to school with was vaccinated." Student 6 said, "It's difficult to adjust with all of the uncertainty." And student 7 said, "I feel lost and confused." These are just some of the reflections shared by distinct students across the state. Yet the impacts of COVID-19 transcend beyond just our K-12 education, impacting our educational and professional futures. Another student shared with us, quote, "COVID-19 completely postponed my plans to attend a 4-year institution. Both my parents worked full-time. I had to take care of my father's health, and I could not leave to attend a university even after my college acceptance letters came in." Katie and I understand the risks that we are taking as we stand here and speak to you all today. Many of our fellow youth organizers have faced both physical and online harassment for our efforts for furthering this cause. Many people in opposition to SB-866 claim that in opposing the bill, they aim to protect their children. However, they are also the ones perpetrating physical and online violence against the very children that they aim to protect. One of our peers, a 14-year-old, received a death threat by email, while others have been publicly doxxed on Twitter and other platforms. We should not feel frightened to come here and fight for our rights. Many of students, such as Katie and I, who have been victims of unequal vaccine policies, cannot vote. However, the voting age is not a determinant for who is a stakeholder in public policy. So in parting, we implore you to consider student stakeholdership in the vaccination crisis and use your understanding of the multidimensional nature of the public health space to express your support for SB-866. Will California align itself with the anti-vaccine, anti-abortion, anti-gun control extremists? Or will California continue to lead on vaccine access, health equity, and school safety by passing the Teens Choose Vaccines Act? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is George Soares. I'm a legislative advocate with the California Medical Association. I am here representing our nearly 50,000 physician members. Thank you to Senator Wiener and Dr. Pan for bringing this timely measure forward. I would also like to thank the committee chair, committee staff, and everyone who's worked on this bill. CMA is in strong support of this measure. As previously noted, existing law allows for minors 12 years of age or older to make certain medical decisions without parental consent, most notably as it relates to reproductive health. This precedent was firmly upheld in 2011 when Assemblymember Tony Atkins authored and passed Assembly Bill 499, which allowed for minors 12 years of age and older to consent to medical care related to prevention of sexually transmitted disease, including the HPV vaccine. This measure was later signed by then Governor Jerry Brown. SB-866 simply expands the autonomy to FDA-approved vaccines. It is a priority of the California Medical Association to support the development of legislation that focuses on universal adolescent immunization. This bill is a key component in ensuring minors aged 12 and older are given the same opportunity to protect themselves against harmful disease, regardless of their personal barriers that are presented. Vaccines are an incredibly important public health tool to protect the health and well-being of our youth and ensure schools across the state can safely navigate the ongoing battle with COVID-19 or any other life-threatening disease we may be faced with in the future, or now for that matter. Our physicians spent a considerable amount of time deliberating this legislation and ultimately decided to be in strong support of this effort. I can assure you that physicians have a duty to always have their patients' best health outcomes in mind, and this legislation captures that commitment. SB 866 gives a physician the option to have a conversation about vaccination with their patients who are 12 years of age or older. This is not a mandate. Minors aged 12 and older have the capacity to make this decision. We have an opportunity here today to give those individuals the authority to make those decisions and protect our communities. Assembly members, this is an important vote, and we don't take that lightly. but please choose the side of science, equity, and choice. Our country is looking to California to be a leader on these issues, and we have an opportunity to make a statement with this legislation. I respectfully urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Bloomberg, yeah, and you have still close to 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Dean Blumberg. I'm a pediatric infectious disease specialist here in Sacramento. And I'm pleased today to testify in support of SB-866 on behalf of the California Immunization Coalition, which is a nonprofit public-private partnership dedicated to achieving and maintaining full immunization protection for all Californians to promote health and prevent serious illness, disability, and death. All vaccines that are approved by the FDA and routinely recommended by the Centers for Disease Control for Children are safe and effective. And there's no question that for individual children, the benefits of all routinely recommended vaccines far outweigh the side effects. The effectiveness of vaccines is really truly astounding. The number of measles cases in the U.S. has dropped by 99.99% due to immunization. And similarly, there's been more than a 99% decrease in cases of tetanus, German measles, and severe infections like meningitis due to Hib or Haemophilus influenza type B. Smallpox has been eradicated from the world. Polio is on the verge of eradication from the world. And worldwide vaccination has prevented 37 million deaths between 2000 and 2017, which is a 45% decrease in deaths due to 10 vaccine-preventable diseases relative to no vaccination. This has saved more than 2 million deaths per year. However, these vaccine-preventable diseases are still around, and they still remain a threat to children. In my practice, unfortunately, I have seen children brain damaged due to meningitis with meningococcus, or lose an arm or a leg due to sepsis or blood poisoning. I've seen children with severe cases of influenza in the intensive care unit on ventilators, sometimes on heart-lung bypass machines, and sometimes dying from these preventable diseases because they are not immunized. And for COVID-19, we often think of this as a disease of adults, but it can be a threat to children, a serious threat. To date, more than 13 million children have been infected with COVID in the U.S. This has resulted in more than 42,000 hospitalizations and more than 1,500 deaths. I've taken care of many hospitalized children here in Sacramento with COVID, some in the ICU, and unfortunately have seen some children die from COVID and complications here in California. Immunization rates are suboptimal due to a variety of barriers, so any change that facilitates childhood immunizations will result in improved health and wellness for children. 12-year-old children are already able to consent for HPV and hepatitis B vaccines, so it's only logical to extend this consent to other life-saving vaccines, such as meningococcal or meningitis vaccine. Unfortunately, COVID vaccination rates for children significantly lag behind other age groups, with less than 60% of 12 to 17-year-olds receiving 2 doses. And this is a real tragedy, since the CDC reports that unvaccinated people 12 years of age and older have a 17 times increased risk of dying from COVID compared to those who are vaccinated. That's why it's critical for California immunization policy to maximize opportunities for childhood immunization, including allowing children 12 and older to consent for these potentially life-saving preventative measures. Routinely recommended vaccines are safe and effective, they keep children healthy, and they save lives. On behalf of the California Immunization Coalition, I ask for your support for SB 866 to facilitate childhood immunization for a healthier California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And